There we go. Okay. Well, good morning again, everyone. Thank you for being here for one of our, I guess, our last webinar with Main Street America for the year, which is crazy. But we're really excited to have Lisa Thompson with us this morning. Again, I know I just said this, but for those who are watching the recording, if you attended the Storefront design workshop in person in Noblesville, Lisa's going to kind of be building off of that a little bit today, talking more about the actual design of like window displays. I know it says placemaking 101 at the top, but this is going to kind of play into that as well. So this will be a really good one to share with design committee, business owners, yeah, people like that. So with that, I will pass it over to Lisa.
Perfect. Okay, so good morning, everybody. I am Lisa Thompson. I'm a senior program officer at Main Street America. And so I don't know how many of you may know this, but I actually owned a retail store in Washington, D.C. In the 1996, I guess, was when I opened it. I owned it for about 10 years in the historic neighborhood of Georgetown, and I sold fine linens, china, crystal, silver, pretty high-end store. Everything was imported from Europe. So I've had the best fun sort of going through and creating this webinar for you all. It made me go back through some of my old display pictures and my window displays and things like that, and look at what I was telling you and sort of thinking about, oh wow, I should have done a better job of that. But hopefully this will sort of help you all sort of look at window displays and how important they are to a retail business or a merchant. And then we're also going to talk a little bit about even store displays in the interior of a store. Let me share my screen and we'll get started. Okay. So we know that, the business's storefront is really a calling card for a retail business. And for those of you that were maybe not in Noblesville, I'm going to go over just a few little things that I covered there, just to kind of set the tone and sort of where we are for today. And so it's really important as a Main Street manager or a merchant to understand sort of the importance of a storefront and all the different elements that go into a storefront, because each one of these elements is really important to that business and how they attract and make sales every day. So, you've got what we call the sign band or the frise, it's that sort of flat area that's sort of, and this is a traditional storefront area, but, this is typically just above the storefront on the first floor, but below those second floor windows. And, this area really provides a great space for your signage. When I had my own store, I effectively used this space to brand my shop. And it was really interesting because my store was called Baldaquin, and it's a French word. It means canopy bed. My husband, who's in marketing, really did not want me to call it that at all. He said people won't be able to say it, they won't be able to spell it. But I was effectively able to use my sign band through display and lettering to really make the word very clear and distinctive. And in fact, people would call my store only after like 2 or 3 months of being in business to ask me what the name of the store was next year. That was very, very popular and had been there for 10 years. So I felt like I had sort of accomplished something by effectively using this sign band. So that's something that you really want to pay attention to as you do those walkabouts in your downtown. The other essential part of it that you're going to see in some of these pictures when I talk about window displays are those awnings and canopies. You're going to notice that in a lot of these that I'm going to show you, they have retractable awnings. Retractable awnings are more historic and more appropriate for our historic buildings. But we also want to pay attention to where you place those awnings on the building. And they can be used for signage, for, putting the name of your business on them. But again, an awning is an important part of how the storefront sort of reads to the public. And of course, lighting. Lighting is so essential. And this is something that I notice as I travel about that, there's the interior lighting of the store display, the store window display, but there's also lighting on the exterior of the building. So really, lighting can be used to highlight those architectural details of the building, but also that storefront window display. So, your store might close at 5 or 6 in the evening, but when those diners excuse me, are out walking around at night, you really want to give this sense of openness, that ambiance that is going to help attract customers to look into your windows and to shop at night while your shop is closed. And of course, beyond the windows, signage is really by far the most important element of your storefront. So, making sure that your signage makes a strong and dynamic first impression is really important. And it sort of demonstrates your business's personality and attitude from the very beginning. So we know that businesses have a lot of signs. Some of them necessarily don't attract new customers. Some of them are handwritten. So you really want to sort of look at how these signs are what are they saying to the customer, to the potential customer about your business, and what kind of tone are you wanting to set up. It's also important to think about sort of those pedestrians that are going to read your sign from the sidewalk, but also those folks that are in vehicles that are moving through your Main Street district. This is a really iconic sign in Paducah, Kentucky, where I was the Main Street director. I think it's also important to realize that our storefronts have evolved and changed over the years. And so, think about these iconic signs that are in your downtown and how do we protect them from demolition or destruction. So, but what we're really here to talk about is sort of window displays. And so, the display window is really the greatest marketing opportunity that a business has to attract attention to those passing by and really to generate sales. So we want to, those highly successful storefronts are transparent, so that we can see into the business from the get-go. You also want to be able to see in both at that daytime and nighttime hours because, there's always people walking on the sidewalks. So you want to give them something to, visually, make them that walk a more pleasant experience. So, the display window is also that relationship between the interior of the shop and that pedestrian that's walking on the sidewalk. So, sometimes they can be character defining elements that you want to make sure as a preservation organization that we're sort of working to preserve and protect. But we also want to keep in mind that this is the merchant's really calling card to building a healthy and strong business. And so this was kind of interesting. I was in Shelbyville, which is a Main Street community here in Kentucky yesterday, and we picked up an old book on storefront design from 1937. It was a textile book. So that's what some of these photographs come from. And I thought it was really interesting because, here it was in 1937 and they were talking about, the fundamentals of storefront design. And I thought, oh gosh, I'm going to be talking about this tomorrow. So we bought the book and it's really, it really hasn't changed a whole lot, to be honest with you. I mean, I think that humankind has been selling things, peddling their wares one way or another for hundreds and hundreds, thousands of years, So it's It's very simple what we're trying to do, but it just takes a little bit of imagination and a little bit of effort. But what I thought was so interesting was that, this book was written in 1937, and you could already see where our storefronts were starting to evolve and change. And so I thought that was kind of interesting because I know as I've traveled around the country, the further east you go, the more traditional flat storefront there is. But as we move west, even in Indiana, there are, sort of modifications that have been made to them sort of in the 1960s, where you start to see these larger display windows. And then the entrance to the store is actually set back, which from a merchant's perspective gives them so much more display space, but it can also be challenging about how you use that space. So thinking again about, that window display, it's really all about, making the sale. So it's the billboard for your store. And it can be the make or break factor in whether a customer enters your store or walks on by. I will never forget standing in my shop in GC and watching Martha Stewart through the door of my shop and thinking, oh my God, is she going to walk in or is she going to walk by? Thankfully, she walked in. But again, it sort of tells you that people make a decision about whether or not to come into your store by what the exterior looks like. And too often, our Main Street merchants create windows that are really boring, they're cluttered, they're poorly lit. And I say that with all love and respect because I know how hard it is to be a merchant. And sometimes it's the last thing that you want to worry about, but it really is an important element to their business's success. So one of the first things that I think is really important when you are creating a storefront design is that every window should have a theme. So if you have a display of spring goods, for example, and spring is your theme, then you want to have, floral decorations, maybe a painted picture of a field in spring, trees in blossom. Think about, if you're a children's store, maybe you want children playing games in the spring. So how do you symbolize spring through your display or the mannequins of your kids and the clothes that they have on? I was telling Abby as I was putting this together, I must have the Christmas spirit. So a lot of these are going to have sort of Christmas themes to them, or Christmas displays. But each of these photographs that are highlighted here, you can tell that obviously the holidays is a theme to them. But if you look really close, the merchandising and the items that are in the display windows actually sort of support what it is that they're trying to sell. And so, each of them sell very, very different merchandise. But you can tell that it's a holiday display window that is authentic to the merchandise that each of the stores sell. And I think that's the most important part to remember. Because again, the window display is really about making that sale and encouraging that person to come into the business. So, your display should be pretty, but it also needs to create revenue. Um, when I was a retailer, I carried a brand of sheets called Anachini Italian. They also made robes and things like this. And they did this national campaign where they highlighted this beautiful robe on this beautiful Italian beach. And it said, Anachini in bold letters at the top. And I think I even paid extra into a co-op ad to have my store listed at the bottom as one of the places, where you could get Anachini. I had so many people come into the shop asking to buy that robe. Guess what? The robe wasn't for sale. Anachini didn't make the robe. They called this all image advertising. Well, for me as a merchant, I thought that was a complete waste of money because I couldn't sell the robe, which is what people wanted. So, again, make sure no matter what the theme is that you're trying to do, that the items in the store are actually for sale and that you have them so that people can walk in and make the purchase and walk back out. It's really important to know your target audience. It's always important to make sure that your story or theme is appropriate to this audience. Will your theme draw in the correct audience to your store? If your target audience can't relate to your display, then they're going to automatically assume that they won't like your clothes or your items that you have on the inside. So think about who it is that you're trying to target. So here's a display for a children's boutique, and they've got beach balls and the little mannequins with the kids' clothes and sort of those, sand castles that they're building. So it tells you that this is a children's clothing store. In the photograph on the right, what I thought was really interesting about this is that it is a eco-friendly, sustainable market. But look at the Christmas trees that are in the window. So, that is a sustainable sort of symbol that they have used to, again, it tells you it's the holidays, it's Christmas, but they are relating to their target audience through their, eco-friendly store, that even their display is sort of still connecting the theme of their store to the audience on the outside. So I thought that was really pretty clever. We also want to think of things as those visual planes. So what's at your eye level? And again, here's a cute little, this was a diagram that was in this 1937 book. And they were explaining that, you really need to stand outside and think about what is at your eye level and how do you build sort of that hierarchy in your store window, so that the passerby actually, sort of their attention is at those things that are the most primary, effective. And so, here's a storefront from Washington State where they have, I like how they've put sort of this bright green background, the display, so it sort of closes, the storefront window in. But they've elevated at a table these items that are at your eye level as you walk by. So those are the things that sort of get your attention. When you can also tell on it, they've either got a table on the inside that also elevates the things that are right above the panel here, that they are elevated above that so that you can actually then look down on those items as well. So they really have built a nice storefront window here as well. But again, you have to sort of look at what the physical characteristics of your storefront window are, and think about what those heights are. So that's important, so that that pedestrian who's walking by can actually see what's for sale. We also want to surprise our customers. We want to be really creative. I think it's interesting to me that this you see this far more in European storefronts where they actually build these amazing and very elaborate displays on the exterior of their storefront window. So this pumpkin, this is a florist in London, but it's incredible. And then of course, now it's Christmas time, it would be all evergreens and very, it's just big and over the top. But it really draws you in and it makes you want to go inside and see what the store has. And then I like the photograph on the left, and that's just a hardware store. So this was their Halloween display, and it was like, which broom, so they're asking you like, which broom should the Wicked Witch ride tonight? But I thought that was pretty clever, even for a hardware store, to sort of, surprise the customer about what's inside. And then the little one in the middle, this was actually a barbershop display. And I have a video of this, but I couldn't figure out how to show you all video. But each one of these little widgets like move, So, the tiny little barbershop window, it's filled with these little moving characters. And, I'm never going to go into the barbershop, but I will never forget this barbershop. I mean, it's incredible, just that little display window. So but also be bold, so color is probably one of the most important aspects of your display. It doesn't matter if you have a small budget or a large one, color is something that you can all produce to have a really successful window. So before you even start your display, ask yourself, what is that color theme? One of the biggest mistakes in visual merchandising is really forgetting about that theme that we talked about as the number one sort of point. And so when we were in Noblesville, we also talked about the color wheel. And, think about those lessons that we talked about there and sort of what are those analogous, complementary, monochromatic, colors? How do they relate to each other? And how do you use those themes as part of your color scheme? Because it's going to help you create a display that's a lot more cohesive and more visually appealing. So, the photograph of the big elephant, that's actually a Louis Vuitton ad. If anybody wants inspiration, just Google Louis Vuitton or Hermes window displays. They're beautiful, they're spectacular. And there's just one handbag in this window, but that big elephant was the thing that caught my eye. So it doesn't, windows can also be really simple. And I think that's an important lesson to learn, and then the one on the left is in Brooklyn, New York, actually. And, it's kind of funny because we talked about during in Noblesville about air conditioners. This is something that we see a lot in Main Street. But they have effectively used a really great display, thinking about that sailor with all the beautiful flags. And it's an art shop, actually, I think. So, it's just a fun way of sort of, again, reaching and using color to really draw your customer's eye. Keeping it clean and simple. I cannot say this enough. And we're going to talk about this a little bit later, but sometimes less is more. And just like the Louis Vuitton ad where there's a big elephant, but one handbag, it really sends a much stronger message about what is in your store. Now, you also have to, if you're going to keep it really simple and clean, you have to change your displays pretty often. Like you can't keep the same one there all the time. We actually had when I was in Georgetown, there was a bridal shop that was in the block, the next 1500 block of Wisconsin Avenue. And every night they would change the wedding dress that was laid out on this lounge chair. It was incredible. It was so well lit. But every night you wanted to walk by and see what different dress was out there. So I think that's, again, if you're going to keep it really clean and simple, then you also have to rotate those displays on a pretty regular basis. It's also important to, again, rotate that window display regularly. So this is this is the same shop with 3 different displays in it that I found on their Instagram feed. And so, you can tell it's a home goods store, but they have creatively used their window display to sort of, change it up and show you all the different the different feelings that are there. And you can look through the first picture on the left, and you can see where this frame is kind of hanging in the window. And then you see the frame again in this picture on the right. So, that's a very static piece that hangs there. But they use it differently and effectively every time they change the window, sort of to highlight something that's very special. So again, making sure that you sort of rotate those window displays is critical. There was an article that I looked for this morning. It was again, I think it was in Pittsburgh, where they had a very elaborate window display. And every day they would have somebody come in and move a certain piece around the sort of display. and then post it on Instagram. And so it became this kind of game that people would play. Where is this piece today? Where is it, been moved to? So again, you also want to make these windows very interactive. So we talked about this a little bit, that lighting is so important to this exercise as well. Not just what the storefront window looks like during the day, but what it looks like at night. Because again, you want to think about those shoppers that are out there, after dinner strolling. What is it that they see? A lot of times I'll go into communities and we'll drive through after dinner and it looks like it's all dark, you know? So, not only thinking about the exterior lighting, that lights the storefront, that sort of lights those architectural features that we talked about, but how are you lighting the actual interior of your window display? And I think at Christmas, during the holiday season, it's even more important to maybe even leave the lights on in the entire store, or at least the front section of the store. So again, people can kind of look in and see what it is that you have. So let's talk a little bit about psychology of shoppers. This is interesting because, there are people for a living who actually study the psychology of shoppers. There are, obviously interior design professionals that all they do is merchandising. In fact, the antique store that I was in yesterday, where we bought the book, the fellow at the cash register said, "Oh my gosh, I didn't know that book was here. I was a merchandise executive for I don't know what it was he said, but that was what his career was." And then he told me what booth he had in the shop in the antique village, and I knew exactly which one it was because of the way it was merchandised. And so they say that 90% of retailers or customers, when they go into a retail store, that we all turn right. Part of it's because most of us are right-handed, but we also typically in store design tend to put the cash wrap on the left-hand side. And so people naturally want to avoid the attendant, the sales rep who's at the cash rep. So we go to the right, which means that the right is the most lucrative part of the store, the front right-hand side. So, if you take away anything as you walk into other shops in your Main Street district, watch your own behavior and think about how the store is actually laid out. Is it cluttered in the front? So it's kind of overwhelming, and maybe you can't walk right. And if that table was moved back another 5 feet so that you could walk right around it, how different would that experience be? And what are those items that are on that right-hand wall at the front of the store? So I think that's kind of an interesting way about how people move in and out of stores. The sometimes stores are too clustered. Um, I travel a lot in Oklahoma, and the Main Street coordinator in Oklahoma, there is one store that she just cannot go into. She says it's too overwhelming, it's too clustered. She just gets like almost like hyperventilates. It's interesting. I don't get that same feeling. There's a lot going on, but you have to be aware of how stores are laid out and how your merchandise is displayed and how that's going to affect people and spaces. So, so keep that in mind. And then your cash wrap. How many of you, I know that there's always this added sort of stuff that's at the cash wrap. So they have those add-on sales, those small little things. But thinking beyond that, have you ever considered the size of the cash wrap? I mean, I have gone to stores where I wanted to put something on the table and there's no room for me because there's all these other little add-on stuff. It makes me feel very cramped, very almost like I've overspent. Like, oh, I shouldn't, this pile of things that I'm buying looks way bigger on this really small cash wrap than if it were on one that had more space. So think about that, what's that rate of return for pushing those extra sales through those little add-on things that are piled up at your register, or giving that space, so someone feels really comfortable making the transaction. And then just even from a retailer's perspective, if the table is too small where you're doing your transaction, you don't really have room to wrap the package, put it in a bag. It seems like not a very gracious way of sort of closing the sale. So just be mindful of that. So let's talk about the inside a little bit. It's really important to really ignite the imagination of your shopper. I know a lot of times that we just think about, putting displays out there. Here's the pile of candles. Here's the pile of sweaters. Here's the, little tea towels that we want to do. But it's really important to group the products together, so that your customer starts to imagine what this might look like in their home, in their bedroom, in their bathroom, or their kitchen. It may be an outfit, like what would it look like on them? So do that extra legwork of putting items that go together, whether it's by their use, maybe their price, their size, their type, the color theme. Put those together for them. So for example, you might have, a heavy winter jacket. You pair it with some snow boots. You got your knit cap. Maybe you get a sled for display purposes. So that sort of, again, sort of it's that theme that you're trying to build upon. And so, you do that. And then if you're maybe in Southern California, and or you're doing a summer display, you do the same sort of thing, but instead of having a sledge, you put a surfboard there or something. But again, you sort of want to build up that theme of what you're trying to do, to be very innovative. I know, I had, bed, bath, and table stuff in my shop. And so at Christmas time, I created these little gift boxes. And so, before I did this, I had a basket of soaps and I had a basket of wash mitts. And it was like, okay, well, y'all figure out that these things are supposed to go together. Well, as soon as I put 2 bars of soap and a bath mitt in a box, wrapped it up, they started to fly off the shelf because it was an easy holiday housewarming gift. $15. It was already wrapped. It was really easy for them to do. So think about how do you group products in a way to help increase the sales. We also want to engage all the senses. Music is so important when you go into a store. I was in Stanton, Virginia, in another, you can tell I like antique stores, another antique store. And the music went off and stopped. And I kind of looked at my watch and it was like, 10 minutes till 6. And I thought to myself, oh, they must close at 6 o'clock. And this is how they were trying to tell me that I needed to hurry up and wrap up because they turned the music off. But that turned out to not be true. But it's amazing how people build those perceptions about what they hear or what they don't hear. So music can be a really powerful thing, but it can also be a deterrent to people. So be careful about the music that you pick. And then that sighting. So that goes back to those visual cues, what's that lighting, the color, the balance that we talked about, how are you building those themes, and really making those displays. Touching things. I had a linen store, so, I didn't want people to put their hands on all the beautiful linens, but I did have sort of little baby pillows that people could touch and feel, and so that they really got that sensory sort of feeling about, the thread count of a high-end sheet versus, a percale versus a sateen. So being able to let people to touch and feel things is important. So avoid putting items out of arm's reach, and put them in line of sight. Smell. So now, scented candles are a wonderful thing, but it's amazing how a smell in your store can really evoke a person's desire to buy something. So that's an important part. And then, if you're selling food or drink products, always create a sample table, of those seasonal favorites so that people can, maybe taste, a little bit of a spread or something that you have. It will help increase sales of those as well. So make sure that you think about all those five senses and how are you engaging them. It's also important to think about interior signage in your store. I know from experience that not everybody reads the signs, you know, but it's really important to promote those. And again, it may be if you're in a bookstore and you have a collection of books that are about Black love or gardening or home design, sort of put those all together and put a sign out that this is what this is. This is Timberland. It's a boot, but it's again sort of telling that history about this boot and showing how it was made. So think about those things if you have a made by hand store, demonstrate or show the evolution of how a product was made, and tell that story that people love. Also, if you have a hashtag in your store and you want people to engage with your store on Instagram or Facebook, promote that hashtag so that people can then share their stories with their friends. Again, it's all about building, that sense of community. Make sure that when you're in in a store space that you think about all the four sides and the ceiling and the floor. So, nothing should be left empty and blank, so you want to have those contrasting heights and depths that really are going to grab that customer's entrance. You want varying heights, so it sort of really sort of takes your eye around. You want tables that are sort of going to be spread out again in different things. You put things on baskets in the floor. Large lights can hang from the ceiling, position props or plants on high podiums, really sort of striking that balance of the space and the volume. And I know that a lot of our downtown stores have incredibly high ceilings. So you want to be strategic about how you use all that space to really build off the theme or the mood that you're trying to set in your environment. We want to make our stores Instagram ready, right? So I don't know about you, but I love Instagram. And I have got stores that I follow on Instagram that I have never been to, but I want to go in the worst way. One of these stores is in Columbus, Ohio. And so this is the space that they started with. This was the second store that they opened. Not much to speak of, right? Look at what they did with it. Amazing. So it's a home goods store. I want one of these feather dusters, but I cannot wait to go to this store. I mean, it's every picture that I see of it just builds that excitement about why I need to go visit this shop. So, make sure that your stores, you sort of want to encourage shoppers to post their photos on Instagram, so go back to that hashtag, make sure that you're sharing them so everybody knows. And then, even as a merchant, share your own photos to entice people to want to come to your space. And so thinking about Birmingham, I actually even have a store in Birmingham that I am going to go visit when we are there at the national conference. It's called General Birmingham. Again, I've never been there, but I found them on Instagram, and it is some place that I am dying to go to. So make your store Instagram ready. And just like your storefront window displays, you want to always refresh and display your merchandise on the inside. I know it drives a lot of people crazy when, the grocery store or your favorite hardware store does this. But, they say that 40% of your customer only sees 40% of the merchandise that you have on display. So you need to keep moving it around. So as people come frequently to your shop, that they see different things every time they come. Um, and having been a merchant, I know this to be true. I could have had things on my display shelf for, 6 months or a year. I move it someplace else. Somebody walks in that's been in there 100 times and they'll buy it and then they think it's brand new. So making sure that you're refreshing those displays. And always keeping your, if you have a brand, make sure that your brand is really consistent as well. And so update those displays and that store layout regularly to give those frequent shoppers, an exciting prospect of discovering something new. When we think about the future of retail, this is really about experiential retail and it's about engagement. So part of it's about that Instagram. How are you engaging with those customers? But it's also about creating a different type of retail experience that we've known about in the past. Because, we're trying to compete with the Amazons of the world, the Walmarts of the world. And the truth is we can't compete with them. And so we need to figure out how do we engage our customers and start to build this community that Main Street is about so that you really are sort of engaging everybody and building, a stronger network of people that are going to support your downtown and all of the small businesses that are there. So you want to think about, how are we, look at the physical space of your store. How are there ways that you can bring people together in that physical space that maybe promotes what it is you're doing? So let's say you have a gym or a yoga studio. Can you add a juice bar so that you're filling a need for the people that are coming to do your yoga, but it's also giving an opportunity for maybe someone who doesn't do yoga or Pilates to come into that space and experience your juice bar. Um, the same could be true with just putting a billboard or some kind of signage in your yoga studio that sort of says, you know what, we're glad that you come to our yoga studio, but you know what, these are also the places that you can go sweat, out your, frustration in your downtown area. So think about, again, it's about building that community together. Um, it's not retail, experiential retail is not about sales necessarily. It's about how you're engaging those customers. And in the end, it's going to result in more sales. And so, I think during COVID, our Main Street merchants were really good about pivoting. So a lot of us started to look at sort of online websites, even though we had been talking about them for years. But we really sort of leaned into those online websites. We were forced to figure out how to do curbside pickup. And then how do those sort of how are you filling those in-store sales? A lot of folks would start putting merchandise on Instagram and then people would buy it off of Instagram and then come to the curbside and pick it up. So, that's called omni-channel retailing. But our mainstream merchants are getting really good at it. So again, just because COVID's not over, think about, the big box stores are still continuing to do this as part of their services. And so do our Main Street businesses need to keep doing this. Leverage any kind of in-store events that you could do. So if you're a bookstore, book signings, book readings are an obvious thing to connect with your customers. But, it could also be something that was very far-fetched. So think about in the window displays about how you're going to sort of challenge or excite your customer. You could do the same thing in your retail space. Maybe if you're a bridal salon, you have a movie one night where you show Runaway Bride. Why not, right? It would get people into your business that maybe don't otherwise come. It is sort of adjacent to what you're doing, but it's very unexpected. And so that's kind of a fun thing to sort of help engage, bring engagement to your storefront. it's really all about building community. So around your business. Vacant windows. So we all have them. And I think that it's important as Main Street programs to think about, those vacant windows as well. And what do they say while they're waiting for somebody to fill them? So there's a couple really good articles on the Main Street Now website or mainstreet.org, and you can go and read about sort of window display ideas. Um, but there's also, this was something I saw recently in Seattle. It's called Seattle Restored. So you could Google it and look at how they created this program about taking vacant storefronts, and artists now use them as sort of pop-up space. Some of them are pop-up spaces. So if the space is actually, occupiable, there are artists who pop up in these spaces. But some of the storefront windows are not occupiable, but they've still allowed the artist to maybe use the first 10 feet of it to put a display in it. So as a pedestrian that walks by, it really gives you a nice sense of vitality that otherwise would be lacking. And then just to sort of wrap up a little bit, so, we want to make sure that we use transparent glass in our storefront window displays. So replace that dark tinted glass, anything that's textured. Again, we want to do clear glass. And if you're worried about heat, think about that awning and how the awning might want to protect the sunlight that would stream into your storefront window. From a preservation perspective, think about the scale and the shape of the original storefront. And, if the storefront has been modified, also think about when were those modifications done, and maybe those modifications are significant in their own right today. They may not match the other, late 1800 storefronts, but if it's been there for more than 50 years, it probably has gained significance in its own way. So you want to be faithful to whatever the storefront window, how it reads. Think about lighting, both on the interior of your window, but also on the exterior, again, to sort of highlight that business and those merchandising in the evening and to those car traffic, but also to sort of highlight those architectural features that are on the building. And then make sure that you have a cohesive storefront appearance, going back to those, that the signboard, the awning, that whole sort of storefront and how it reads. Also look at color. Color is really important about how that's going to set the mood and the sense, not only for the pedestrian experience for your district, but also for the merchant and what they're trying to convey to their customer base. So, and then here's a list of things that we really try to discourage when we think about window displays. So I know a lot of our storefronts are filled with service businesses who sometimes have awning, or not awnings, but window shades and things like that they close. If you have a facade program of some kind, it's really a good opportunity to kind of encourage them to replace those, and to think about a different way to sort of open up again that transparency of those office spaces, so it looks like there's something active going on there. But other than that, keep your windows clean. I had a window washer in my shop. He would come about every 2 weeks and clean the windows. So I think that's a really important element too. But just have fun, and I would love to see any great pictures of display windows that you all have in your Main Street districts. So I don't know if there's any questions, Abby. I'd be happy to answer them.
Yeah. I was just about to say, if anyone has any, you are welcome to either throw them in the chat, or I think I gave you all the ability to unmute. So I'll give the opportunity if anyone wants to ask a question. I know while people are thinking, one that came to my mind, Lisa, was just advice for them on how to have the conversation with a business owner who has a pretty rough storefront or display, even design.
Mhm.
Like, how might they have that conversation or start to kind of work with them to improve that?
That is a really great question, Abby, because I will tell you that store owners are not always the easiest to deal with. And I can say that again lovingly because I was a store owner and I've been a Main Street director. And so as a store owner, as an entrepreneur, you take this incredible risk, you have this idea, you've got this vision, you have this passion of what you want to do. And sometimes, having somebody from the outside come in and challenge you about that can be a little difficult. So what I was the most successful with was finding merchants who wanted help and then actually almost do it as a group effort. So, think about how are you going to work on this display and do it as an opportunity where all the merchants in the district are invited. And as one starts to see the success and how it builds on the other, then somebody else is going to volunteer and say, hey, can you come help me do that? As Main Street director, especially in Indiana, some of you are all really, really close to each other. So, call your partner, your colleague, and then, to next town over to you and invite them to also participate in this effort with you. And so it's you make a more fun out of it instead of it being sort of more punitive, and you start to build community that way. And so I think I've had the most success with that. Yeah,
I like that. That's a good
yeah,
idea.
yeah, yeah.
Any
And I'm sure
other?
that even you all, I mean, you and Abby and Andrea, the A team, y'all, y'all could go and even be part of the team that kind of helps.
Hmm.
Um, it's a
I was
great
gonna
service.
I was just gonna add, I also am a recovering small business owner slash Main Street director.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And in one of the communities I was a director in, we did kind of a quote unquote grant. So
Uh-huh.
businesses applied to have us come do like a makeover of their window displays. So it was my design team
Uh-huh.
I mean, that was their work plan. So they would do, I think, 2 or 3 a year where businesses could apply. I think we had like a $500 budget.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it was the Main Street that kind of did it because the owners were busy and they're like, we know we need to do this, but we can't prioritize it. So it's just
Right.
something a design committee could work on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Excellent.
Awesome.
Yeah, I like it. I
Any
like it.
other questions?
Yeah. And I mean, I even think about when I go into stores, like, oh, I wish I could move this around.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, and when
Yeah.
you were talking about the psychology of it all, I definitely was thinking, with all of us just having Small Business Saturday, I'm sure we all were in a bunch of small businesses that day.
Mm-hmm.
And it is really interesting to think about, like one of the stores I went to that I spent a lot of money at, I felt really guilty about spending a lot of money because it felt like I had so much stuff on their tiny little store counter. And I
See?
remember feeling that way. And I was like, well, I feel like I'm not buying that much, but I was excited
Mm-hmm.
because I love this store and I wanted to support them, but I don't know why. It was like a really weird
Mm-hmm.
thing where I'm like, yeah, if I would have had like more space, I think it may have not felt like as
Right.
much in my head, basically. But
Uh-huh.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
interesting to think about.
It really is. It really is. Yeah. Well, they're all
All
being
right.
very quiet
Well,
and shy.
I know. Well, obviously, I will send this recording out later today. Like I said at the beginning, this is a great one to send to design committees. If be thinking about maybe that is something in the new year that you do some kind of storefront design training for your business owners and bring in those business owners who want that help and who want that, that kind of
Mm-hmm.
hands-on assistance. And then hopefully it can create a trend, even with some of those more tricky business owners to work with. So yeah, and then I'll include Lisa in the email. That way, if you do have any direct questions
Yeah.
you think of down the road, she's always happy to answer those, or our team is.
Mm-hmm.
So just
Yeah.
reach out. But thank you everyone for being here. And Lisa, thank you again.
Yeah.
This was really great. So
You're
appreciate
welcome.
it.
You're welcome. Bye, y'all.
Awesome.
See you in
Bye.
Indiana.